recording. All right, so I'm going to hand it off to Brian Sugg, the acting district manager for the Canyon Lakes Ranger District. And take it away, Brian. Thank you all.
All right. Thanks, Megan. Good evening, everyone. Brian Sugg, acting district ranger for Canyon Lakes Ranger District. Few things, big thanks to Coalition for the Poudre River Watershed for coordinating and facilitating this meeting. Also, big thanks to Larimer Conservation District, Northern Colorado Fireshed Collaborative, our other partners for collaborating. And I want to thank everyone in attendance because it would definitely be hard to engage with you if you weren't here. So I want to start off by saying we do not have a signed decision. And because of that, we don't have site-specific project information. But instead, the intent of this meeting is to provide updates on our planning efforts, including a review of the project, where we sit currently, strategies, and next steps. We do anticipate receiving a draft biological opinion from the Fish and Wildlife Service on the 17th, so next Friday, and that's going to allow us to take next steps towards signing the decision. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan Grand. He's our silviculturist and acting deputy district ranger, and he's been a leader in this planning effort since its inception.
All right, is that screen coming through okay for everybody?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. So good evening all, and welcome to tonight's updates on the Black Diamond Landscape Resiliency and Risk Reduction Project. So first I want to take a second to thank all of you for attending this evening as well. And I also want to thank a specific many of you on this call and our partners and the many branches of the Northern Colorado Fireshed Collaborative for your participation in this project over the years. We've really leaned heavily on collaboration to make this project a success and develop a shared vision. And it's because of the perspectives and the involvement that the collaborative network has brought to this project that has brought the project this far and really make it into what it is today. Like Brian said, my name is Jonathan Grand. I am the silviculturist for the Canyon Lakes Ranger District and current acting deputy district ranger. I'm also a project co-proponent and lead for Black Diamond, and I'm happy to be presenting here for all of you tonight. Also presenting towards the end of the presentation is Matt Champa. It's our North Zone prescribed fire and fuel specialist, who's also served as a project lead and has been involved with several of our community engagement efforts, not just for this project, but other projects as well, and has really been an agency representative in participating in and working with the NOCO Fireshed Collaborative. We also have several resource specialists available to answer questions at the end of the presentation, who I welcome to introduce themselves as they field your questions after this brief piece. So we have a short series of slides to cover and really want to focus our presentation around the intent of this meeting and discussion, similar to what Brian had mentioned. If you've not been engaged with this project until now, I encourage you to refer to our project website or the story map. You can find that link using the QR code that was on the opening slide of this presentation, as well as the last slide. We will leave that up for a minute after the presentation so you can access that page, or we may drop links into the chat throughout this discussion. We'll cover some background on the history of the project, but we'll really try to focus the bulk of our time on where we are now, our focus going forward, and the continued ways that you can participate in the collaborative process or keep informed through channels similar to meetings like the ones we're holding tonight. So this project is really built out of the recognition for the need for a strategic all-lands approach to reducing risk to communities and forest resources. A significant part of the approach taken was to acknowledge the values of stakeholders within and adjacent to the project footprint, to gauge risk to those values, and to use the latest understanding of science and forest management practices to propose a really strategic approach to reducing risk to those values in large, meaningful ways. And so throughout its development, we project leaders and team members work with partner organizations in a myriad of ways to pool that information and develop tools that ultimately help us land managers integrate those inputs into meaningful project design or proposed actions. And we continue to engage with the Northern Colorado Fireshed Collaborative on this and several other projects, one of which we'll discuss as well this evening. And I've really been bolstered by that collaborative relationship And project design and our planning is being continuously informed by the respective representatives of its various members through our interactions with things like subcommittees and interagency agreements and direct outreach with participating members. So early, we work to incorporate inputs from these relationships and your feedback through community meetings and project scoping and comment. And that process should and is committed to being an ongoing process as these types of projects are implemented on the ground. A major pillar of this project is the annual proposal to the public of an initial management action plan for sub-projects coming out of the Black Diamond decision. This is sort of our assurance that continued public engagement on a project of this size and complexity is provided for, that public engagement is encouraged, and understanding that it's important to the success of the project. This is one piece to the ongoing adaptive nature of the project that ensures that the projects are reasonable, impactful, and continue to represent the values and changing conditions of the landscape over time. Those engagement opportunities, including ones like this evening, they can occur in various ways. At a minimum, our proposals are posted to our project website, and comments can be received through that forum. Based on the expressed interest, we as an agency can then be adaptive in the way we follow up with those comments. That can include things like public meetings, direct responses to input, consideration for project redesign, among a whole host of other potential outlets. We really want to ensure that the public is informed, engaged, and operates as a continued standing member of this project as it's regularly planned and implemented. So I won't touch on a lot of this slide because I think there's a few key pieces to emphasize. But for a quick overview of where we've been with the project and where we are now, the inception of this project has in many forms been occurring over several years. We held a public meeting and scoped the project for comments last September. We've since completed several milestones in the environmental review process, and we're now in consultation, as Brian mentioned, with Fish and Wildlife Service for review of our determination of effects on certain resources. And we're currently waiting on that determination. But from this piece to the ready state where we are now, I'll kind of read this almost word for word. But strategic planning now, considering our proposed actions and priority locations at a commensurate scale with need. So a focused acknowledgement of an existing degree of risk and judicious timing. The need for judicious timing provides us some initial benchmarks that we as an agency can begin planning for, where post-decision site-specific actions that move towards or within those benchmarks we're establishing now have the greatest likelihood of meeting the needed pace and scale. And you'll continuously hear that emphasis from this project on pace and scale, and from our partners as well. And I'll expand on this a bit over some of the following slides. So a primary component of the Black Diamond project was strategy. There's a need to improve wildfire response and safety. There's various levels of risk to different components of the landscape, including communities, municipal water supply, infrastructure, and so on. And those risks are weighted differently and differently to different stakeholders. And that risk needs to be reduced again at an increased pace and scale. Implementation of the Black Diamond project is likely to span a significant portion of time, particularly when compared to the existing need. So being strategic and increasing our commitment to accomplishing larger footprints in these shorter periods of time is in one part how we can measure success of this project over time. Using tools like the high value risk assessment here in the right, bottom right of the screen, and quantitative wildfire risk assessments, we can look to understand the weight of these forest values and the relative risk of negative potential impacts from wildfire to those resource values. So using the toolbox of these proposed actions that we've developed in the project, we can really consider now what strategies and actions can be prioritized in critical areas over time to develop actionable plans for how we move across the landscape. And many tools exist and they interact in unique ways, such as broadcast burning, pre-treatment thinning, aspen enhancement, and so on. And they'll all have some implication of time and effect on them and associated with them. So using these mapping products, such as the ones that you see here, it can help us think through the potential ways that these tools we've proposed in our project and locations across the landscape can work together to be sustainable to implement, meet the pace and scale of need, and be completed in the places with the highest shared risk. So this in part is what gets us to where we are today. Really what this is building an internal strategy and frameworks to be able to facilitate the implementation process at pace and scale. This can look several different ways, but to me, this exercise highlights a few things. So first, what amount of work can or should we be planning to propose for any one year? Essentially capacity. How can we organize future project proposals in a way that scale is relatively sustainable towards our end goal throughout the life of the project? And finally, what parts of the landscape do we need to be looking at to mitigate risk in the most vulnerable locations? And from there, we can start to identify different approaches that may help us be ready to start proposing and implementing these sub-projects in truly informed ways.
Hey, Jonathan, your slides are a little small. I'm wondering if there's a way to zoom in a little further.
Yes. Bear with me one moment here. Let me stop and pivot. And I appreciate the timeliness of that, because this is kind of the piece that I really want to emphasize. This is the map, the things that we can kind of point to in truly sort of meaningful discussion.
Yeah, sorry to not say anything earlier. I didn't want to cut you off, but it seemed like a good pause.
I have several screens open, so I am trying to think through this, how this might work in a different way. I'll give it all of 30 seconds here, and if I can't figure it out, I may need to readjust.
If you can't make them bigger, I can walk folks through how you can zoom in on your end, and then you'll have to drag it down, but we can do that as well if need be.
That might be the best way to do it at this point. I think it's going to take me a second to.
Jonathan, I can also, if you want me to pull the slides up, I could put them up, and then
Please,
you just let me know when to transition. Hang on one moment. Is that a better view for everyone?
Perfect. That's real nice.
Okay. It wouldn't be a Zoom meeting without some sort of technical issue, so thank you all. Is that good?
That's great. Yeah, slide 6, I appreciate it. Thank you. So an important part as to why we're here this evening then is to present and discuss an iteration of that process, that strategic positioning and planning process for site for near-term needs. And we've all gone through this collaborative journey to stand up sort of a large and complex project, but here, what does all this prioritization and valuation really equate to when we begin looking at how our proposed actions and the grander strategy is implemented? Since the project's likely to span several years, potentially up to and exceeding 20 years towards our purpose and need, and the adaptive management approaches that we want to maintain, that there are adaptive management approaches that we want to maintain over that time with monitoring and public input, and focusing on the near term addresses sort of both major priorities in the landscape and has a more reasonable estimate of the likely needs and approaches to take, since it's within a reasonably understandable time frame or a relatively static condition. And three major opportunities or needs were identified through this exercise when asking how we can accomplish the greatest reduction in risk in the near term. These include treating forest stands along a network of pods or strategically located fuel breaks, reintroducing fire through broadcast burning, and pre-treating portions of stands proposed for broadcast burning to reduce the potential for negative effects from prescribed fire or otherwise undesirable fire behavior, or to improve proposed fire lines and other fuel features. And these actions are largely focused within the strategic ribbon, which is here in sort of that salmon color, which collaboratively identifies pods or general forest areas where risk to values is greatest and where proposed actions should be prioritized. What you see here is sort of a projection of that scale of, or that intersection of priority, locations, capacity, pace, and increased pace and scale. In yellow, that is a portion of the larger network of pod boundaries that falls within that priority ribbon that blocks key resources, community resources, and infrastructure to the east, from some of the higher elevation forest to the west, and sort of bridges that gap there, and looks at key areas where we can begin to implement prescribed fire sooner rather than later, so minimal pre-treatment, and within that priority landscape as well. This next slide, please. So part of this is planning is a continued collective effort. So to the first map in the top left of your screen looks at this larger priority landscape. I think that was on Megan's slide as well. It looks at a strategic location of pod networks and trees to help move the landscape towards mitigated risk and safe and effective wildfire response. Black Diamond is in a north piece to that. That's in green. Can't see it on this one. It probably was worse on my much smaller slides. But to the south, we did just complete part of a Pearson Park project, which is also fuels treatment along pod network. So we're really looking at continued planning to extend this effort, not just with the specific needs that we have here, but the needs with Black Diamond, but the needs across the northern Colorado Front Range. And a piece of that in that next map to the right of there, on the very bottom, there's orange hatched mark areas. That's another project outside of Black Diamond that's being concurrently proposed and going through some process of development within the agency to look at continuing treatments along that ribbon as well. So we wanted to take this opportunity to catch everyone up with where we're at, kind of how we're thinking through this prioritization process and trying to do good representation of all the feedback we've gained over the year through the collaborative process. But we also wanted to highlight the other efforts that are going on. A piece to this is I'm not positive when this is going to be available, but is public scoping, similar to Black Diamond, where we wanted to garner or solicit comment to help improve the project, identify opportunities or concerns that we may be missing. We really value input largely for all projects, from Black Diamond and its development to these types of projects as well. So things to come on that, to look forward for the opportunity to provide your comment and input on other projects. In this project, I'll hand it over to Matt to discuss a little bit, is our salt cabin project.
Thanks, Jonathan. Again, my name is Matthew Champa, and I'm the prescribed fire and fuel specialist on Canyon Lakes Ranger District. And as Jonathan alluded to, we are looking at another piece of the puzzle, so to speak, that is a little separate from the Black Diamond project, and that would be Salt Cabin. As you can see on the map, essentially Salt Cabin is a piece of land that is just south of of the Poudre Canyon, adjacent to Cache La Poudre Wilderness, and up the Pingree Park Road. It's important to mention that this project is again separate from Black Diamond, and will be treated as such, and will have its own scoping and its own life of its own, essentially. With Salt Cabin, it's interesting that Cameron Peak was impacted the area in Salt Cabin, as well as High Park fire, which was to the east. So what we essentially have is a triangle of unburned fuel. As you can see, the units, unit 5, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So a triangle of unburned fuel that is surrounded by, two very large fires. But our thought and the thought process behind this is to treat these areas, to, even though they're surrounded by by wildfire, that these areas need maintenance and need work to be done from the prescribed fire standpoint. What we'll be focusing on in this triangle Salt Cabin will be wildlife enhancement, and then actually maintenance burning of the land to keep up with the fire return interval in this area. Salt Cabin was burned a number of years ago in the Dad Bennett prescribed burn, probably over close to 20 years ago. So it actually has had prescribed fire in the footprint. And so we're essentially coming back in to do some maintenance work and to focus on a little bit of wildlife habitat improvement as well. The goal for the project, ultimately, like the rest of our prescribed fire projects, is to do broadcast burning, but we're also taking the opportunity to do some pre-treatment in the area, and that would include thinning from below, using hand crews to thin the understory and make hand piles. So Unit 5 will encompass a good portion of that sort of treatment, whereas Units 1, 2, 3, and 4 are kind of standalone and don't need a ton of pre-treatment. So those will all be burned. Unit 5, we'll see how that goes. Like I said, it'll be thin from below for the most part, but there may be opportunities to do broadcast burning in Unit 5. Beyond that, that's essentially the Salt Cabin project. And when we get to questions, if folks have any more questions regarding Salt Cabin, we're happy to answer those. Not good, Megan.
All right, let me put that back up. Sorry, I forgot that QR code there. There's also a link to that story map that Karina put in a little bit earlier in the presentation. You can see that in the meeting chat, and that's a great resource for all things Black Diamond. So definitely check that out. But I can put that QR code back up here real quick too. All right, so we have plenty of time for questions, comments. If you feel most comfortable just putting your question in the chat, that works. We are also open to you turning your camera and your microphone on and having a conversation that way. So feel free to raise your hand and we will, or put questions in the chat and we'll have a discussion.
Hi all. I guess I'll start if that's okay. So it's less of a an overall question, but Carla just turned on her camera here as well. But Carla and I are researchers with CU Boulder. We're doing a collaborative research project on testing and recording the emissions from the emissions and health effects from prescribed fires through NSF. And we were hoping that we could collaborate with you guys on that burn. We've done burns with Vail in the past. We've connected with the USFS in other locations, and also with some other front range fire departments on more pile burns. And we've also done we've also done some broadcast burns recently. But we were wondering on how to reach out about starting that collaborative process.
Hey, Sean, this is Matt. If you go, I don't know if you have access to the first slide, or if you were to take my email down, I'd be happy to go ahead and get you guys set up. It's very common to have a lot of research going on in our burn, so it may get probably a little busy, but yeah, reach out to me and I'll be the point of contact there.
Sounds good. Would you mind sending?
Type it.
Yeah, I'm gonna type that in here for you.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, and yeah, we'll reach out. We'll give you more details with it, and maybe set up a side meeting. Maybe just go ahead and go into first burn. Who knows? But research permits I know come first. So
sure.
Yeah, I'll reach out to you. Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Sean. Any other questions or comments? All right, so we have a question from Maya. Just curious why Salt Cabin is standalone and not part of Black Diamond. I was also wondering if there's a map showing prescribed fires and other fuels treatments over time that would show the Dad Bennett prescribed burn from 20 years ago. I'm familiar with the prescribed fire web map, but it only seems to go so far back in time. Thanks.
Yeah, I can touch on the first part of that, or Matt, if you want to go, and I can.
Yes. So our for Black Diamond, the Highway 14 is the southern boundary of the Black Diamond project area. So Salt Cabin essentially falls right outside, and Salt Cabin really wasn't introduced until we are well into the Black Diamond project. So that would be the reasoning behind why Salt Cabin is independent of Black Diamond, and also being independent of Black Diamond when it comes to NEPA and planning. We're able to focus in on a project. If Black Diamond runs into some snags or takes a little longer to get approval for or to get signed off on, we can have smaller projects like Salt Cabin that are easier to plan out, and hopefully we can get through the process of Salt Cabin independent of Black Diamond. And then as far as the map goes or information or the map goes for the Dad Bennett burn, I'd have to do some digging. I'm just going off of knowledge from years past, but we could probably get if there was interest, get some intelligence on and maps for the Dad Bennett burn as well.
All right, Andrew.
Yeah, good evening. Andrew Rothman with Wild Earth Guardians. Jonathan, you were talking earlier about, sharing information about specific projects that are going to be planned kind of on the individual basis. What's going to be the process for sharing those? I'm guessing they're not going to show up on a SOPA. So What's going to be the process for knowing when those come out and how to comment on them?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So and there's other folks, if I miss something, please help me add sort of to the whole picture of this, because there's a lot of pieces that went into PIO outreach. We'll look to do at least, and I touched on this briefly, a notification of initial project proposals. So this is sort of focus areas, a range of the types of actions that might occur within there, or alternatives, to our project website, and I believe the story map. And that's where there is and maybe Megan, you can help me out here, an opportunity to comment through that process. And so there's a couple steps to that. So there's the comment piece. And then what we can do internally is take that and sort of get an idea of, we really want to do justice to the values, perspectives, and inputs on these projects moving forward. So we want to take that then and look at what's the appropriate follow-up for that we can make sure that we're having true consideration of these, and they're being integrated into these projects in appropriate and meaningful ways. And then out of that is where we go through a process of sort of redesigning projects or continuing to work with folks based on those comments. And then there's a second iteration of that management action proposal based on some of the feedback and collaborative process in the interim between those two stages. And then that's where you start to really see that next level site specific thing. So it's kind of a smaller process of the sub project designing, really focusing in and incorporating that input in meaningful ways. And then so out of that's kind of where you would see that second proposal of a detailed project.
Sorry, you said like on the story map itself?
Yeah, Megan, could you?
Yeah, let me pull that up really quick here and just give you all a brief overview of where you can find information here. So we will keep this up to date as new information arrives from the Forest Service, but essentially, yeah, you've got kind of an introduction project summary, but in the project timeline, we get into a little bit more detail about some of the things Jonathan is mentioning here. And then the conditions-based management, what that kind of process looks like. And then how you can really get involved. And we've list here what has happened already. You can find project documents, information about public meetings. But this get involved section is where you're going to find any new opportunities to comment. And then you can keep scrolling down here. We have recordings of past meetings. We will put this recording here as well as the slides, any news, and then contact information. If there's anything you feel that we're missing that we could add, please let us know. But yeah, this is just kind of a home base for this project that's outside of the Forest Service website, that's a little bit more interactive and yeah, just kind of, I guess, a little bit easier to navigate in a way. So
Thanks.
All right, we have any, okay, so I've got a question from Tom. It appears Black Diamond encompasses areas near the Mount Margaret and Lady Moon trailheads. In the future, salmon colored. This was treated this summer by Magic Feather. How does Black Diamond relate to Magic Feather?
That's a good question. And so Black Diamond, or well, I should say Magic Feather, is much the same way as, hopefully I explained it okay, with Salt Cabin. Magic Feather is similar to Salt Cabin in that it was its own standalone project area. I think Magic Feather itself, I want to say 2017 or 18 is when the project was proposed and accepted. So well prior to Black Diamond. And we do still have, and so again, think of it as two independent projects, and they just happen to overlap. We still have, a fair amount of work to do in Magic Feather to complete the prescribed burning in there. That essentially these things, the operations could be going on concurrently and in the project areas, that being Black Diamond and Magic Feather. The nice thing about what Black Diamond provides is that it, the footprint of Black Diamond is very large, and it allows us to, cover some more ground, so to speak. And whereas Magic Feather is overall smaller in the grand scheme of things, and having some a project the size of Black Diamond, that gives us opportunities to cover some ground and take a good look at a good portion of the northern part of our forest is extremely helpful compared to just putting together these smaller projects such as Magic Feather. So but I guess the main theme is that Magic Feather is its own separate project area prior to the rollout of Black Diamond.
I might add just one thing to that. That was great, Matt. Really one of the neat pieces that came out of this process is looking at a landscape that overlapped past treatments, things that still have current existing NEPA, but really it's been a massive perspective change or development as an agency, as a collaborative. So these projects that were planned under different types of purpose and needs, often similar, some still applicable, those visions get grandfathered into this sort of integrated collaborative approach. So even though Black Diamond may not be, or may in some parts be, authorizing additional actions or not authorizing actions under old projects, those old projects become part of that prioritization framework and that conversation. And so there's a lot of opportunity to have net benefit gained from looking at Black Diamond and looking at things like ongoing good work like Magic Feather and other prescribed fires in that same focal collaborative landscape need. And maintenance is a big piece of that too, getting things into desired fuels, conditions, and maintaining that. And so all these pieces play together to sort of a shared vision of that landscape specifically.
I got a direct question in the chat. What specific fuel treatments and timeline are planned for the areas north and west of Panhandle Reservoir?
I would have to familiarize myself with where that is specifically. We can follow up, but I think, at the stage we're at now, we don't have a clear vision of the specific actions we're looking to do outside of what we've proposed in our current proposed action. I think once we start moving towards more site specificity and including considerations for areas like that, then we can start to look at the immediate, how certain treatments fall into that immediate need in that area. So that's an area that we can write down and note as maybe of some import. And that would be something I would say look towards the next public meetings, maybe once we have a decision, once we're going through the process of looking at specific site need, we can see how that fits into that framework and what those actions might be. And then that's your opportunity, I think, to maybe recommend places like that have specific concerns, and we can consider that in project design.
Great. Thanks for your help, Karina, on that question. Josh?
Yeah, hey everyone, I'm Josh Roberts. I'm mitigation coordinator with Lerma County Office of Emergency Management. And Karina, I think that question was targeted, or what it was speaking to is a planned mitigation treatment project that we have through a grant through FEMA. And I see Cheryl on the call here too. And I've been working with Cheryl and some other folks there in the Crystal Lakes community on that particular project. At the end of the day, we are still waiting on FEMA to give us a green light to begin that work and to bring somebody on board to begin that work. And we don't have that particular green light yet to do some of that work. So happy to speak to any sort of follow-up questions with that. But I heard that question and saw an opportunity. I think it was, about that project. So I thought figured I'd chime in.
Great, thank you, Josh. And we will be joining the meeting on the 14th with some of the Crystal Lakes CWPP members. So that group has invited the Forest Service to be at that meeting and talk more about Black Diamond. So can get into some details there that relate to that CWPP and Black Diamond. Any other questions? So we will be planning a similar both virtual meeting and in person in the spring. So by then we should have some more information about Black Diamond and some more opportunity to discuss some of the future projects. Jonathan or any other Forest Service, do you have anything to say about kind of the next steps and timeline?
I think that's pretty comprehensive. Again, we're just kind of in the stage where we are now with consultation and the project and trying to be strategically prepared to be able to meet that pace and scale. And I think those spring meetings are where we're really going to start looking at hitting the ground running in a collaborative and very strategic way. So things to look forward to. And I appreciate everyone being here for this piece of it. And we just wanted to make sure that you all were aware of that upcoming sort of opportunity to engage with this project, and that you had some background on where we're at now and the sort of focal length we might be bringing to those meetings.
Great, thank you. All right. I'll give everyone one last chance to ask questions or make comments. All right. I think everyone was able to speak that wanted to. So again, we just would like to thank you for coming tonight, and thank you to the Forest Service and our other fireshed partners for help with organizing this. And yeah, I just appreciate the collaboration on this project. So hope you all have a great night, and definitely stay in touch through the story map and through the Forest Service email newsletter. I will be sending some of these links out with a link to the recording, and we ask if you have any neighbors, friends, family that weren't able to make it tonight that might be interested in this, please forward that information along to them. So thanks again and have a great night.